Welcome to In Conversation with Lazarus Carpenter, a podcast introducing authors, poets, and magical creators, sharing their lives, achievements, hopes, and ambitions across cyberspace. This week, special guest from Wales, UK, writer and author, MACMILLAN-JONES.
Welcome to In Conversation with Lazarus Carpenter, a visual symphony of conversation unfolds.
The truth lies in bold questions, a glimpse into deep insight.
Let our journey provoke your thoughts.
Experience the depth and variety of our discussion. Subscribe now to join the conversation.
Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Lazarus's podcast, and also to Book Bedtime Tales from Wales on Oystermouth Radio. Our guest author this week is MACMILLAN-JONES, who lives on the west coast of Wales near Aberarn and is a fortunate man in that he has a sea view. Hello, Will. Good afternoon.
Hello, Laz. Good afternoon to you. I have to say the sea view is a bit speculative. It's a bit like a 1950s landlady's sea view. If you stand in a particular place on the property and look out towards the coast, there's a small dip. There's a small dip in the hills and you can just see the sea between them. A small but important bit of blue.
Oh, isn't that sweet? I'm sure
most of the rest of it is sheep.
I'm sure our listeners and viewers have visualized that whole picture. Your description. Will, tell us about yourself.
Okay, I'm recently retired, fairly recently, stretching it a little bit. I live on the west coast of Wales, as we all know, and I love living in this land of myth and mist and adventure. I put in my bio that I still like walking on the hills around here looking for dragons. I haven't found one yet, but it is only a matter of time, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially in Wales. Yeah, they're all over the place if you look. Yeah. So you've recently retired from what?
I used to be a consultant in international taxation.
Right. You're a good man to do people's accounts then.
Yes, and a practicing accountant. As the old joke goes, I spent all my life practicing because I still haven't got it right yet.
So I mean, my recollection of you is that in addition to, adding things up for people and ensuring they pay the right amount of money for this, that, and the other, blah, 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 that you're a bit of a musician and you're certainly a prolific author.
Well, I think it's about 21, 22 books now.
Yeah, that's very prolific.
If I include the short story collections and the poetry. Because I usually, if I have to describe myself, I normally say that I'm a novelist, a poet, and a storyteller.
Right.
Working in West Wales.
You also do magic tricks. I've seen them at book fairs. I mean, if the audience could actually see you in your full regalia, flogging your books on a stall at a book fair, I think they'd have a good idea of who you are, and of course how insane you are, because you're not a full shilling half the time, are you? Really?
Sanity is overrated.
Yeah, it is. If you're absolutely right. Well, let's get to the nitty-gritty.
You've got to have the ability to draw your imagination in. You've got to have the ability to think of yourself and to put yourself into a different environment, a different life, a different world even, and be somebody whom you're not always.
Let's do a deep dive into this secret world of yours, Will, and let's start by talking about one of your book series to begin with. Do you want to take us into a nice in-depth look at your mad space scout and his intergalactic
Oh,
espionage.
Space Scout. Yes, yes. The first. This is the first one. Scout pilot of the
Can you hold it up a bit?
Union,
We can't
which,
see it.
as you can see from the cover, it was a finalist for 2018 in the Wishing Shelf Awards. Some years before that, about 2015, I was invited by a small press to write a story about first contact between a human astronaut and another world. And I thought to myself, well, most people are going to write quite an upright, militaristic, clean-cut spaceman. And I think I'm going to write the opposite. So my character was down at heel, a coffee addict, definitely an occasional drunkard, and in a clapped out spaceship whose boss really, really hoped he wasn't going to come back from the mission alive. And I loved the character when I'd written him. I loved him so much that I wrote another group of stories about the same guy in the same situation with the same clapped out spaceship. And eventually I discovered I'd actually got 2 novels worth of individual stories. And I rang up the publisher, whom I knew quite well, and I said, look, listen, I've got this collection now. And they said to me, oh, well, you'd better release them yourself because we're already booked up for 2.5 years on our release schedule. And because I'm a very impatient guy, I stop laughing. I decided I'd put them out myself, so I did, and they've been very, very well received. They're light-hearted. Then it's effectively called space opera because that's what it is. It's like a soap opera in space. It's just a fun group of stories about a character who gets himself into all sorts of scrapes and troubles.
EastEnders on Jupiter.
Or more particularly, he relies on me to extricate him from all the messes he gets himself into.
What's he called?
Well, this is more amusing now. My character is called Frank Eric Russell, and for those listeners who have ever been into historic science fiction novels, they might remember from the 50s and 60s a writer called Eric Frank Russell, who wrote some brilliant space opera for that time. So I used his names as a homage to it because I enjoyed his work so much.
And you wrote that in 2015 initially.
They started in 2015, and there's been a bit of hiatus the last couple of years, but I'm partway through the final book of the collection. But as with all my series or collections, every book is a standalone novel. That's something that I learned from the absolutely immortal Sir Terry Pratchett. You write every book as though it could be so that it can be read at any point, and people can dive into your work in any order.
It's a very good way of collecting stories and flogging them, isn't it, really? Because at the end of the day, it does mean that each time it's a fresh experience and yet memories as well.
Well, I don't know about you, and probably anyone who's listening to this, we've all had the experience. You go into Waterstones or your local bookshop, and there's a book on the shelves that looks interesting. So you pick it up and you look at it, and then you find it's book 3 of the series. And to really be into it, you have to have read book 1 or 2 first, and the shop doesn't have them. So you're put off buying that 3rd book because you can't get into the storyline. It would be like picking up volume 3 of Lord of the Rings and trying to start getting into the story from the Return of the King. You couldn't do it.
No, that's true.
You just couldn't do it. You'd have to start from the first book to actually get the storyline. And so many series are like that. Famously, of course, we've got the Wheel of Time that Amazon are doing at the moment through Amazon Prime. Well, if you don't start with the first book of the Wheel of Time,
the rest of it is meaningless.
You're lost because none of it will mean anything to you.
No, it's true. It's true. Let's move on and tell me about what I'm very interested in this paranormal series that you wrote. And I understand that a lot of the stories are based around Wales itself. Do you want to take a bit of a deep dive into that for us?
Okay, well, the the Mr. Jones mysteries started from my personal experience in my grandfather's house in Manchester, which I genuinely believe to have been either haunted or possessed. And the whole story revolves around my paranormal experiences of living in the house, and visiting the house and feeling the atmosphere. The first book in that series is The Showing, which is probably the biggest
Hold it up a
selling.
bit. That's a big series.
There you go. There's The Showing in its latest incarnation. I can't tell you how many that's sold, but it's in the thousands down the years. It's been that first release date for The Showing was 2013, and it has sold constantly and solidly ever since. It's
People
a great
like
way
paranormal stories.
It's a great way into the Mr. Jones collection. But after I never really set The Showing in any particular location, but the next book in the series, Portrait of the Girl, that was specifically set around Cardiff. If you've ever been to, have you ever been to the arcades in Cardiff with those big glass windows?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Well, I discovered there was one of them. If you walk into it and you walk along beside the windows, a set angle, looking ahead, you can almost see round the curve of the windows as the arcade curves to the left and then sort of squares up a bit in a zigzag, and it will take you round and round. Oh, our battery's running low. Would you believe it? It would take you round and round visually, and I thought, well, what if the reflections you're seeing are not what's actually there on the other side of the arcade? What if it's taking you into a different place or different people?
I wonder if
it's amazing where your imagination
bring your screen towards you a little, because your head is sunk like that.
It's amazing.
You're a bit like the Titanic going up and down there, Mr. MacMillan-Jones. So yeah.
I've always liked the sea. Quite a few of my spare small books are short stories, sea stories. In fact, at school, I won a creative writing prize for a sea story, which I've never really followed up per se. But if you go east from Oystermouth and you head right across and you keep going, you come to Buryport on the other side of Llanelli. And just beyond Buryport, there used to be another port called Penbrae. And if you walk along the coastal path out of Buryport, all of a sudden, once you've gone far enough, you come to this spot where you can see a low wall and a small, low, sloping bit of tarmac, and that's it. And that actually used to be the port of Buryport. It's totally silted up. I thought, well, what happens if one day there was a boat in this silted up port? And that gave me a wonderful ghost story of a chap getting into trouble out there in the channel, heading towards Llanelli, trying to get safe, and being rescued by some passing trawler, brought safely into harbour. And when he wakes up in the morning, he finds he's in this silted up port.
Sort of like a transportation from the sea to silt.
Yeah, saved by a ghost. So,
in addition to the paranormal stories and also our space scout and these intergalactic espionage, you've written about rock and roll bands, you've written werewolf stories, you've written zombie humor stories, and I understand that you've just recently written something about nasty things going on in the probation service. Is that right?
That's right. Quite a stark cover, this one. It's called Released into Hell. Right. That's actually Swansea Prison on the front.
Yeah, I recognised it. Not that I've been in there, but
it was such an admission from you, lads. Such an admission. I know. I hate to dig any further. A family member got into a spot of bother a couple of years ago, and looking at the way he was treated and the things that happened to him, I became quite interested in the way the criminal justice system works for someone who has committed an offence and been found guilty. And I always believed that if they got a small prison sentence, they served the prison sentence and that was it. I was quite disturbed because I didn't know to find out that's not the case.
No, it's not. No.
If you go to prison, even for a short time, you come out and you're under the complete control, and I do mean complete control.
That's right.
Of the
probation service. Yeah.
And they are not only that service is in crisis after a totally failed effort at privatisation and subsequent renationalisation and consistent underfunding, undertraining, and and having unqualified young people effectively taking decisions that can have an astonishing effect on someone's life. I was not comfortable with what I was finding out, so I've interviewed quite a lot of probation officers. I've interviewed people on work experience. I've interviewed people who have been in prison when they've come out, and they've been able to talk to me. And I wrote this story called Released into Hell as a faction story. It's based on facts that have happened to a wide range of people and the experiences of a wide range of probation officers, and attempts to portray a very realistic approach or portrayal of what can happen to someone when they come out. It's not always comfortable reading, but it's something I'm hoping to shine a light or open a window into something that most of us know absolutely nothing about. Until you ever come into contact with the criminal justice system in any serious manner, most of us have absolutely no appreciation of what happens to people and the difficulties that they have in rebuilding their lives. Did you know, for example, that there are prisons across the southeast who now routinely give sleeping bags to people who are leaving prison because they know they're going to be homeless?
Because they know they haven't got anywhere to go, and there's no places in probation hospitals. Yeah.
And yet,
quite well known fact.
There will be no places offered to them by the probation staff because they haven't got any places to offer them. There'll be nowhere for them to go because they've lost contact with their families.
There's never been enough spaces for halfway houses, from release to prison and then back in the community. They do tend, I think, my experience anyway, it suggests to me, and I know quite a few probation officers, mainly I've got a couple in my, one in particular in my creative writing group. So I know they have a lot of problems with, rehabilitation and one thing and another, because either you're quite right, there are not enough staff, there aren't the resources, and there certainly aren't the beds available in different locales for people to come out. I mean, it could be argued, on a more sensitive note, that at least it's thoughtful to give them a sleeping bag so they're not going to freeze to death on the bloody street. Well, you're right. It is a terrible state.
What I was about to go on to say was that all these people who come out under the care of the probation service, one of their first problems is that they have to have an address. Which, if you're homeless, is somewhat difficult. But if you don't have an address,
you can be recalled to prison.
A primary cause of being recalled. Somewhere, almost a third of our current prison population are people who've been recalled by the probation service. Now, the problem we have there is that because of the nature of the service, it doesn't always attract the correct type of candidate.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Can I just stop you for a minute? Because that's a massive percent. I mean, 33 and you're actually saying that 33 and a third percent of those currently at Her Majesty's pleasure are there because of recall.
Yes, the average
That's a tremendous amount of people.
over 50% of those released from prison are recalled to prison to complete their sentence.
Where'd you get your stats
within
from?
a month to 6 weeks of release?
Where did you get your stats from?
Prisons. You can go on to gov.uk.
And those stats are there,
the prison,
and that's what they said.
and
Goodness
the Prison and Probation Service release a lot of statistics every year. Many of them are frightening. For example, 2 people kill themselves in prison or on probation every 3 days.
Wow.
But it's not reported because prisoners and those on probation aren't classed as having the same value to society by the media.
Well,
so many of them will be from drug abuse. Many of them will be mostly will be from depression, maybe linked to drug abuse, or maybe linked to the circumstances that they find themselves in. The probation service has a lot of people working in it who are very, very committed, there for entirely the right reasons, and are really doing their best to help people. But unfortunately, it also has a significant proportion of people who are not there for the right reasons and exercise their powers more or less without any overall review or any sort of overview of their activities.
Without supervision, basically.
Yes, a relative. To recall an individual to prison is pretty much the whim of the probation officer. The individual being recalled to prison has no right to appear or attend a hearing before he's recalled. The recall has to be signed off by a reasonably senior probation officer, but the only information presented to them is that by the probation officer wishing to recall the prisoner.
There's
no oversight. There's no independent review.
Share with us, a little bit about the actual book. Perhaps one of the stories from the book.
I've collected stories that happened to people on release from prison. So the individual I've written about has committed a crime. As you read the book, you become more sympathetic to his crime. I don't really want to give away spoilers, but you become a little bit more sympathetic to his crime while still accepting that what he did was wrong. And he then goes through a number of things that have happened to various prisoners that I interviewed for this. For example, because his crime was violent, he becomes estranged from his family, largely through pressure from the probation service. He's told that even though he has a career to go back to, he's not allowed to go back to that career, as the probation service have the power to control what job he can and can't do.
But they're also, what was his career?
He was a chef.
Oh, right.
Because being a chef, that involved working with knives.
Yeah. And clean.
So you can. The book's trying to be very nuanced in that it presents a reasonable guy trying to rebuild his life and finding that the bureaucracy places obstacles in his way that are unnecessary.
The nature of his actual crime, it was violence, obviously. But I mean, what I was always under the impression that the nature of what actually happened, in terms of self-defense or whatever else, it defines very much whether or not one can do various things, doesn't it? Because if it's self-defense and you're violent to save your own life, that's kind of a bit. But let's say you killed the guy by accident, but in self-defense, then that's kind of different. Isn't that not different? Doesn't that make
there is very little available nuance to probation officers, even to the best of them, in terms of what leeway they have under the rules. The rules obviously can be bent and can be distorted, but that tends to be by people who don't necessarily have the best intentions and aren't working in the service for the best of reasons. Many of the probation offices around the country have never had a proper inspection. According to the government's data, I don't think Swansea or Neath probation offices have had an inspection in 10 or 14 years.
Wow.
And the last inspection they had suggested that at that time they were failing to provide a proper service. It's a very, very curious matter, and it's one that really everyone needs to become more aware of, because prison reform and the way we handle people who've committed a crime and try to support them afterwards to avoid repetition of a crime or further offences is something that we really, as a country, we don't do well at. We have the highest recall rate in Europe. We have the highest percentage of our population in prison in Europe. Are we, as a nation, are we more criminally minded than anywhere else? You wouldn't think so.
No, not.
But we lock up more people. Than anywhere else. Surely there has to be a better way of doing things.
Your book is sharing with the reader all of the difficulties that are happening through personal stories, almost like case studies, I guess. Is that a correct?
Well, it's a fictional story. So we follow one individual character who has committed a knife crime. And we see difficulties he has in rehabilitating himself, in getting into secure employment, maintaining that job, and avoiding being recalled. And some of the various ways, often very petty ways, which can trigger a recall, are exposed. Just because they need to be shown, really. And I'm trying to show people how difficult it is for someone to, even with the best desire in the world, how difficult it can be for the system to allow them to rehabilitate themselves. Which is, at the end of it, what we all want out of it.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Who published that?
I've published out through my company, Red Kite Publishing, and it's just called Released into Hell.
Right. Lovely. So,
and it's now out on audiobook as well.
Oh, right. Did you do the audio?
No, I've actually allowed Amazon to make them for me.
Oh, right.
Because I'm quite lazy these days after retirement, and B, because I wanted to see how well the system would work.
And does it work?
It seems to.
Right, that's good. And is the CDs actually the audio is actually available through KDP? Is it on Amazon? Yeah,
it's all available through Amazon, straight through the website. In fact, all the books.
You've done all the books with Amazon's KDP, have you? Wow, yeah. That kind of puts narrators like me out of business. Well,
I was just offered the chance to have it done free, so I felt I should take it.
Well, anything that's free, yes, I certainly wouldn't be doing it for nothing. Right,
of course you wouldn't.
Let's move on.
The labour is worthy of his hire.
Yeah, indeed. Let's move on to have a little look and a little dive into this thing that you wrote about the obsessive man whose hobby.
This isn't
created all
out
these
yet.
issues in his marriage.
This is called The Last Viking. It's not out yet.
Right.
I'm hoping it will be on release by the end of the year.
Okay.
And in this, a perfectly ordinary, relatively boring man goes to see an exhibition at the museum. It's not located specifically anywhere, but it's based on a fairly mythical version of Milford Haven.
Right. Okay.
Perhaps a cross between Milford Haven and Swansea. But anyway, he goes to see this exhibition, and he's very, very drawn to the remains of a Viking ship that have been found in the mudflats and pulled out and put onto exhibition in the museum. And he finds himself so drawn to this that he decides that he's going to build a replica in his garden.
Right. Okay.
And well, you might laugh, but you'd be amazed what people build in their gardens.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
I've come out of a flying and aviation community, and the home-built aircraft is a very, very common thing, and has been for decades.
I suppose if you've got a garden big enough to do it in, it's not a problem.
Well,
So what happened to our protagonist then?
There's one particular aircraft called the Taylor monoplane that was actually designed carefully to be built in a 2-bedroomed upstairs flat.
Really? Right.
Because that's where the designer lived. Now this guy, he gets a tent in his garden and he builds his replica Viking ship in there. But he's become so obsessed with this build, so obsessed with the Vikings, that he starts to see them in his head. They become an actual presence in his life.
He's losing the plot.
Yes, basically he's losing the plot.
Yeah.
And with losing the plot comes losing his marriage, losing his relationship with his son, because all he can think about is the build of his replica ship. Paying the bills doesn't really come into his head. The mortgage arrears don't come into his mind. His wife and child move out because they can't stand being with him any longer.
Sounds like a classic case of obsessional neurosis, that does, doesn't it?
Yeah, obsession, compulsion, and eventually he gets his boat built and he launches it into the haven
On his own.
And is he on his own?
Well, I don't
because
know.
the final question says as he sails out into the haven on his newly built boat, his girlfriend, his wife, his son, they all think there are two people in the Viking ship as it sails off.
Representing in two parts of his personality, is it?
The two parts of his personality.
Yeah.
Is there a real life Viking on board with him, as he believes himself, or not?
It almost sounds as if he became possessed with the idea, which manifested a possession, which manifested maybe a ghost or something.
You never know.
No,
You never know.
What's very good is it's all the other side of it is, of course, it's almost like developing a schizophrenic personality, isn't it? And that the schizophrenic personality was then manifested as two people on the boat. Yeah, why not?
Is it schizophrenia when there's somebody actually there with him, even if he's the only one who can see them?
Yeah.
That's a big question that runs through the book.
Yeah, it's a good question. Will, are all your books are available through Red Kite Publishing, aren't they? And they're all available on Amazon. Is that correct?
They're all easily available through Amazon.
Right. Your website.
We're just moving into wider distribution at the moment with Draft to Digital, which should see bookshop availability as well by the summer.
Right. So, in terms of your website's down at the moment, isn't it? So people can't get in.
Yeah, I can't understand that. I'm having to work that out at the moment.
Oh, these things are tech. You see, it's text. Don't drive you mad. Anyway,
yeah, I hate technology.
What's next?
I'm happiest with a quill. Have you ever written with a quill?
Yeah,
you should do. No, you should do.
No, but I write with the fountain pen, which is handy. I always found
it is handy, but it's not quite the same. The reason it's not quite the same is with a quill, you have to write more slowly, even than you do with a fountain pen.
You see,
And that allows the thoughts to coalesce and concentrate a little more.
That's a definition I will have to play with in my mind to try and understand. But yeah, I always found, you see, I haven't written with a quill sort of thing since I was in the infants, when they taught us to write. When we actually did write with the old dip-in doodahs, we were learned to. Anyway,
that's right.
Anyway, I digress. So just to wind this up a little bit, what's next for you, Will?
Well, we've got two books just recently released. There's The Tenant of Death Grange, which is a werewolf horror. You'll recognise the building on the cover, Laz, I'm sure, as Craig Castle.
Isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Although it's not set there, but it's set in an equivalent building. And this is the one that I had so much fun writing Road Trip Zombie. I've always, as a bucket list thing, wanted to do Route 66.
And I thought you were going to say I wanted to be a zombie then, right?
Well, you never know your luck.
Okay, anything could be arranged. So
I'd always wanted to do Route 66,
right.
And I've come to the conclusion that age has got away from me, and I probably won't do now.
No.
So the other way to do it was, as my character drove Route 66, I drove with him using Google Earth.
Right.
And I followed his route exactly down the whole of the Mother Road across America. Looking at the scenes, looking around, looking at the things he'd seen, experiencing it vicariously, not just through the eyes of the character, but through my own eyes on the computer screen as well. That was the nearest I could get.
Well, it's certainly novel. Will MacMillan-Jones, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on our program today. And we wish you well with your future. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the invite, Raz. I've had a lot of fun doing it as well.